the person who raises the money, or puts up the money to start the business, owns the lion's share of the business. So learn how to sell and keep learning. For me, learning to sell was much like learning to drive race cars. It was my own fear that I had to overcome. I am saddened by the fear in the eyes of people who want to be entrepreneurs but are afraid of selling. Secures patent. Legal. In 1869, Thomas Edison receives his first patent at the age of 22. He was doing his job by legally protecting his asset. Later in this book, I will go into why this step is so important for any entrepreneur. Works for the telegraph company. System. By working for the telegraph company, Thomas Edison learned to understand the power of a system. That is why, when inventing his electric light bulb, he was also designing the electrical system that would power his light bulbs. If he had not worked for the telegraph company, he might not have known the importance of this system. Another word for system is network. That is why the richest people on earth control networks, such as television networks, radio networks, gasoline networks, network marketing networks, and distribution business networks. A big difference between a small business owner and a big business owner is the comprehension of the importance of a system or a network. Just looking at the Rich Dad Company, our success is largely due to network systems. For example, Warner Books distributes our books through their network system of booksellers. Our TV shows travel through the airwaves of television networks all over the world. Our investment seminars are joint ventures with large radio networks. Overly simple. As you can tell, this overly simplifies the importance of making sure all 5 jobs of the BI triangle are done. Once again, if one or more of the 5 jobs is not being done, the business suffers. If an entrepreneur designs a business and forgets one of the 5 jobs, the business suffers or even fails. The business succeeds or fails before there is a business. That is why it is important to do your homework, even if it means working for free. Before you quit your job. As this book goes on, we will further develop the BI triangle. Before you quit your job, it is important to look deeper into each job level of the BI triangle. This does not mean you have to be an expert at each level. This does mean as an entrepreneur, you do not have just one job, you have 5 jobs. So before quitting your job, spend a little time learning a little more about each level. Sharon's Insights. Lesson number 3. Know the difference between your job and your work. Rich Dad said, work to learn, not to earn. With that advice he was telling Robert to do his homework, to learn the skills that would help him build a strong BI triangle around his business. He encouraged Robert to learn how to sell. What are your skills? Look at the 5 jobs of the BI triangle and rate yourself as to where you are strongest and where you are weakest. Product. Legal. Systems. Communications. Cash flow. What if you find that you are totally lacking in one or another of those skills? A savvy investor will recognize if one of these areas is lacking and will likely not invest with you, no matter how good a sales job you do on him or her. Does that mean that you are doomed to failure? Of course not. You bring someone that has the skills that you lack onto your team. That person can be an equity participant and part owner of your business, an employee, or an advisor. No one can be an expert in everything. In planning your business, you bring together a team that covers all 5 jobs to ensure a strong BI triangle. That is why team is part of the framework of the BI triangle at Rich Dad. Our partnership was great because we all brought different skills to the table. Robert, Kim, and I were all strong entrepreneurs, with skills in all 5 jobs. But it was the combination of our strengths that propelled the business forward. Product. The cash flow game was the original signature product with Rich Dad Poor Dad written as the brochure for the game. Robert and Kim had created the game and Robert and I have written Rich Dad Poor Dad and the Rich Dad series of books. While these original 2 products remain our core products, we continue to produce additional multimedia products and services to supplement them. The Rich Dad Advisor series of books was created to share the advice that we received from our advisors with you so that you might benefit from them in building your own team. Legal. None of the Rich Dad Company founders were attorneys, so we relied on our advisors to fill that function. Michael Lecter is an integral part of our team and protected our rights in the products through patents, copyrights, trademarks, and tightened strong agreements with our suppliers and partners as outlined in his Rich Dad Advisor book Protecting Your Number One Asset Warner Books. In addition, Michael helped us develop the joint venture and international licensing strategies that we used and still follow today. Our growth has been through using licensing and strategic partnerships using other people's money and resources. This strategy is covered in Michael's Rich Dad Advisor book OPM, Other People's Money. Garrett Sutton is a corporate attorney and the author of Rich Dad Advisor books Own Your Own Corporation, Warner Books, and How to Buy and Sell a Business, Warner Books, which relate to the legal section of the BI Triangle. It is imperative that you choose the right entity structure for your business. Garrett's books will help you understand your choices so you can better discuss your options with your own corporate attorney. Spending the time and money to set up your business and protecting your assets in the beginning is crucial. As Robert learned in his wallet business, you may not get a second chance. Trying to save money on these important steps at the beginning can end up costing you so much more later on. Systems. I had experience in designing and building the business systems needed to support the company. Having years of experience in book and game publishing, I knew how to create the manufacturing, ordering, inventory, sales fulfillment, customer service, and accounting systems to make the business operate smoothly and to position the company for growth. We also found strategic partners who already had the systems in place in certain markets to support us so we didn't have to recreate those same systems. If one system fails to operate correctly, it can cause your entire business to implode. Communications. Robert is a brilliant communicator. He can take complex subjects, like accounting and investing, and make them easy to understand. He can talk to a group of 25,000 people, and each of them will leave feeling he or she has had a personal conversation with him. Robert and Kim had years of experience in creating and presenting investment seminars. Kim oversaw the public relations and promotions arm of the business, making sure we were in the public eye as much as possible. I oversaw communications with our partners and strategic alliance partners. All three of us are strong salespeople. To read more about sales, refer to Blair Singer's Rich Dad Advisor book Sales Dogs, Warner Books. Blair reviews the various types of salespeople and how each type can become more effective in sales. In addition, we recognize the importance of trademarks and brand recognition. Trademarks are the symbols that communicate to our customers that the Rich Dad products and services originate with us. Trademarks tie the company's reputation and the goodwill with its customers to its products and services. We relied on our advisors to develop and protect our trademarks. Today, the Rich Dad trademarks and trade dress are recognized as identifying Rich Dad products and services throughout the world. That did not happen by accident. Keeping in communication with your customers is very important. Through our website, www.richdad.com, we provide free information, both a free and a subscription community, and information about our cash flow clubs, special promotions, and upcoming events. Cash flow. As an accountant by training and an entrepreneur in spirit, I manage the cash flow of the company. All three of us shared the philosophy that no money was to be spent until we knew where new revenues would come from to pay for the expense. It was this shared philosophy that made our partnership so strong. The three of us did not need money and took no salary for the first several years of the company, until the cash flow was strong enough to support it. The cash flow section of the BI Triangle is extremely important because a business's cash flow is similar to a human body's need for oxygen for its bloodstream. A lack of sufficient cash flow is one of the most common reasons for business failures. HOWDOIBUILDATEAM. This is by far one of the most often asked questions I hear. The best way to build your team is to start by looking at the 5 jobs of the BI Triangle. You don't need to make your team members partners with ownership in the business, but you need the skills on board to complete the BI Triangle. HOWDOIPAYTHEM. In the early stages of your business, you may need to be creative in how you bring your team together. You may agree to pay an advisor more than he or she asks for, if he or she agrees to wait to be paid until the sales can support the payment. You may add the talent through an advisory board instead of bringing the person on full-time. In some instances, you may need to bite the bullet and find the money now to pay for the appropriate guidance and legal protection. It is important when you find partners or strategic partners that you be open about the financial arrangements. Try to find partners who are not financially needy. Financial need has brought many wonderful partnerships to an abrupt and bitter end. Entrepreneurs ANDTHEIRTEAMS. Rich Dad said, business and investing are team sports. It is so much fun to have the right team, the right mission, and the right people covering the 5 jobs of the BI Triangle. When all of these roles are covered by the right people, your business will have a great chance of success. We are taught to be individual players in school. But in the world of business, it is all about having the right team and cooperating to propel the business forward. For more information on building a strong team, read Blair Singer's Rich Dad Advisor book The ABCs of Building a Business Team That Wins, Warner Books. Using other people's moneyandresources to build yourbusiness. As I mentioned earlier, an entrepreneur is a master at using other people's money and other people's resources to build his or her business. There are a number of different types and sources of OPM. The concept of OPM includes more than the traditional mechanisms for funding a business, obtaining a loan, or selling equity interests to investors. It also includes non-traditional forms, such as in-kind contributions and cooperative ventures. By strategically choosing the appropriate types of OPM, and strategically timing fundraising efforts, you can build your business but still minimize your loss of control. NEWMANAGEMENT. As the Rich Dad Company has grown, so has our need to bring in new management. While Robert, Kim, and I as owners will always be ultimately responsible for the company, we recognize the need to bring in new leadership and management to oversee each of the areas of the BI triangle. As your company grows, so will your need for the right team and advisors. It is important to recognize when you need to step aside to provide for future growth of your business. Getting started. Go back to your personal assessment of your skills and how they relate to the BI triangle for your business. Do you have the team to cover the essential skills of each job of the BI triangle? If not, start looking for the rest of your team. If so, you are one step closer to building a successful business. OceanofPDF.com. Rich Dads. Entrepreneurial Lesson Number 4. Success Reveals Your Failures. OceanofPDF.com. Chapter 4. Street Smarts versus School Smarts. Good grades in the real world. If I do well in school, will I do well in the real world? I asked my rich dad. That depends upon what you define as the real world. The BI triangle became more meaningful to me after my poor dad shut down his ice cream franchise. In his 50s, he had taken his early retirement money and his life savings and lost it all. Instead of rebounding, which many entrepreneurs do after the loss of a business, my dad seemed to go downhill. Rather than start a new business, he took a job as the head of the teachers' union and went after his ex-boss, the governor of Hawaii, demanding better wages and benefits for teachers. Instead of continuing, learning from his mistakes, and becoming a better entrepreneur, he once again became an employee and an advocate for employee rights. One reason why he did not rebound was because he was out of money. Instead of learning to raise capital for his next business venture, he just took a job. In effect, he was starting all over again, doing what he knew, which was to work for and save money, rather than learn something new, such as learn how to raise money. He went back to the world of employees where he felt more comfortable. My education continues. Realizing that it was the lack of skill in the communications level that brought my dad down, I applied for a job in sales at IBM and the Xerox Corporation. It was not the paycheck but the sales training that I was applying for. Rich Dad had told me that if I wanted to be an entrepreneur, I had best do my homework at the communications level of the BI triangle. After 2 interviews, it was obvious that IBM was not the company for me, and I am certain they knew that I was not the employee for them. After 5 interviews at Xerox, however, I was on the short list of 10 candidates applying for 4 positions. The final interview was with the Honolulu branch manager. On that day, 6 of the 10 finalists sat outside his office, a scene much like the scenes from Donald Trump's hit TV show, The Apprentice. The other 4 candidates had already been interviewed. At the time of the interview, I was still in the Marine Corps, and was dressed in my Marine Corps uniform. Sitting outside the branch manager's office, I nervously surveyed my competition. All of them were younger than me, fresh out of college, very attractive men and women, and dressed like corporate executives. The Vietnam War was still on and very unpopular in some circles, which meant men in uniform were unpopular in those circles as well. Being off the military base and in downtown Honolulu among civilians was not fun. I had never been spit on, but I had been spit at several times. So I felt really out of place, sitting next to these young people in business attire, in my Marine Corps uniform, which consisted of a short-sleeved khaki shirt, green slacks, short haircut, and military decorations. Finally, the secretary notified me that the big boss was ready to talk to me. Entering his office, I took a seat in front of him. Reaching across the desk to shake my hand, he wasted no time in saying what he had to say. I've reviewed your file. You come highly recommended by the rest of my staff who interviewed you. They believe you could be a valuable asset to our sales team. With that, I took a deep but quiet breath and waited for the good or the bad news. Although he was saying nice things, I noticed that he had trouble looking at me. His eyes were constantly buried in my file folder. Finally he looked up and said, "I hate to tell you this, but I am going to be the one who turns you down." Standing, he extended his hand and said, "Thank you for applying." Standing and shaking his hand, my blood was boiling. I wanted to know why. Why was I turned down? Figuring that I had nothing to lose, I asked, with all due respect, "Sir, would you mind telling me why you're turning me down? You haven't even given me the courtesy of an interview. Can you give me a specific reason why you're so sure I'm no longer a candidate?" "Now is not the time," said the branch manager. "At this moment, we have 10 excellent applicants and only 4 openings. I wish we had more openings, but we don't. Why not wait a year and reapply? Maybe your chances will be better then. Now, if you'll excuse me, I need to continue interviewing the other candidates." Looking directly at him, I said, "Just give me a reason. How can you tell which one of us is better than the other without an interview? Besides, I believe this is a very rude way to treat me. You have me come all the way over here and then do not even have the courtesy to interview me. So just tell me how you can make a decision without an interview. That is all I want to know." "Okay, if you must know, you are the only applicant without an MBA. You only have a bachelor's degree." With that, the branch manager walked to the door to show me out. "Just a minute," I said. "After graduating from the Merchant Marine Academy, where I earned my bachelor's degree, I've spent 5 years in the Marine Corps, fighting a war no one wanted to fight. I did not have to go to war, because I was sailing for the oil industry. I was employed by Standard Oil, which made me draft exempt, yet I volunteered anyway. And now you're telling me that you are not going to hire me because I didn't go back to college to get my master's degree. I had other things to do. There was a war to fight. And you're telling me that you'd rather hire draft dodgers who went to school. That is not what we are here to discuss. We are not here to discuss the war or our political inclinations," said the manager, who was about my age. "And yes, I am hiring people who went back to school. The job market is tight. We have many qualified applicants, so we can afford to be choosy. Right now, we are only hiring applicants with MBAs. That is how we are making our decision. Go back, get your MBA, and maybe then we'll talk." "So why wasn't I told this earlier?" I asked. "Why let me go through this process only to tell me now?" "We make exceptions for exceptional people," said the manager. "Even though you did not have a master's degree, our screeners thought you might have other qualities we are looking for. So far, my other managers thought you were good, but not exceptional." At that moment, I decided to become exceptional, or at least memorable. The manager, holding the door open, once again extended his hand for a weak handshake with a weak smile. Refusing to shake his hand, in a loud voice I asked, "Tell me something. What does a college degree have to do with sales?" With those words, all the other applicants with their MBAs turned their heads and stared at the open door. It shows character. It shows dedication and a high degree of intelligence. "So what does a college degree have to do with sales?" I repeated. "Okay," said the manager. "What makes you think you can sell, Mr. Marine? What makes you think you're better qualified to sell than these applicants who have more education than you?" "Because I have spent 5 years getting a different kind of education, an education you cannot find in school. While these kids were cramming for college exams, I was flying a helicopter into Viet Cong machine gun nests. My education has been in leadership, to bring out the best in my troops even though we were all terrified. Not only have we been trained in classrooms to think under pressure, we have had to think under pressure in actual combat. Most important, I have been trained to think of the mission before I think of myself, to think of my men before I think of myself. These college kids have been trained to merely kiss butt for a higher grade." To my surprise, the branch manager was listening. I had his attention. At that moment, I decided to go for the close. Even though I do not have an MBA, I know I have the guts, the courage, and the ability to think under pressure. I know because I have been tested, not in the classroom but on the battlefield. I know your job is to beat IBM, just as my job was to beat the Viet Cong. For a year, I have been flying my gunship against the Viet Cong, a competitor far tougher and more determined to win than any IBM sales representative. My training for the past 5 years has allowed me to beat the Viet Cong. That is why, even though I do not have an MBA, my Marine Corps education has prepared me to beat IBM. If you think an MBA program trains these kids to beat IBM on the street, by all means hire them. I have my doubts, but I do not have doubts about me. If I can beat the Viet Cong, I know I can beat an IBM sales representative, even if they have an MBA and I don't. The entire office area was silent. Looking down the row of hopeful applicants, briefcases carefully placed at their sides or on their laps, I could see the MBAs shaking a little. They had heard everything I said. Turning to the branch manager, I shook his hand and thanked him for listening. I had said my piece. Smiling, I said, I think I'll go work for your competitor. Just a minute, the branch manager said softly. Please step back into my office. I do have the power to make an exception in spite of our current hiring policy. Nothing to lose. After being hired, I went over to Rich Dad's office to tell him the news. I also told him what I said once I knew I was not going to be hired. He smiled and said, sometimes we win the most when we have nothing to lose. He also said, the hard part for most people is getting to nothing. Most people would rather hang on to a little than let go and get to nothing. 4 years of misery. Learning to sell was much harder for me than learning to fly. In fact, there were many days I wished I were back in Vietnam flying against Viet Cong machine gun nests instead of being on the streets of Honolulu, knocking on doors. Basically, I am a very shy person. Even today, parties and social events are painful for me. So knocking on the doors of strangers was a terrifying daily experience. For 2 years, I was the worst salesperson on the Xerox sales team. Every time I saw the branch manager in the hallway, I was embarrassed. Every time I saw him, I remembered the Vietnam hero speech I gave to get the job. At my semi-annual reviews, my branch manager always reminded me that he had hired me on faith and how his faith in me was slipping. Finally, on the verge of being fired, I called Rich Dad and asked for a meeting. Over lunch, I explained to him that I was failing. My sales numbers were down, my income was down, and I was always at the bottom of the list of salespeople. What do you think my problem is? You're not failing fast enough. Rich Dad laughed his usual laugh. His laugh was his way of letting me know that I was okay and just stuck in the learning process. How many cold calls do you make a day? He asked. 3 or 4 on a good day, I replied. Most of the time, I am doing busy work at the office or hiding in some coffee shop, working up the courage to go knock on another door. I hate making cold sales calls. I hate rejection. I do not know anyone who likes rejection or making cold calls, said Rich Dad. Yet I do know people who have learned to overcome their fear of rejection and the fear of making cold calls. They became very successful. People in spite of their fears. So how can I stop failing? I asked. Again, Rich Dad laughed and said, the way to stop failing is to fail faster. Fail faster, I whined. Are you kidding me? Why would I want to fail faster? If you don't fail faster, you'll fail anyway, smiled Rich Dad. Look, you're in the middle of a learning process. The process requires that you make many mistakes and learn from those mistakes. The faster you make mistakes, the faster you get through the process and get to the other side. Or you can quit, then the process spits you out. Rich Dad was saying the same thing Thomas Edison said about failing 1,000 times before inventing the electric light bulb. Rich Dad was also saying the same thing my driving instructor was saying to me when I was learning how to drive a race car at high speed. They were saying that if I wanted to get through the process faster, I had to be willing to fail faster. Failing at failing. For a few weeks I took Rich Dad's advice to heart and did my best to make more cold calls. I knocked on door after door at high speed. The problem was, I was still not getting in front of the person I needed to talk to. Their secretaries were very skilled at keeping pesky salespeople like me away from their bosses. Failing at failing faster, I called Rich Dad again and asked for advice. I called him because I realized I was even failing at failing. Again, he laughed and said, keep your daytime job and find a sales job at night. But find a sales job that will let you fail faster. Naturally I whined and complained. I didn't want to work at night. I was single and this was Hawaii. I wanted to be in the nightclubs of Waikiki. I did not want to be selling at night. After listening to me moan and complain, Rich Dad simply asked, How badly do you want to be an entrepreneur? The number one skill of an entrepreneur is their ability to sell. If you do not get through this part of the process, you'll be better off as an employee. It's your life, it's your future, it's your choice. You can fail now or you can fail later. It was an old lesson. I had listened to the same lesson before. The subject changed. This time it was the subject of sales, but the lesson was always the same. The lesson was if I wanted to succeed, I had to be willing to fail. With my own dad's business failure still fresh in my head, I knew this lesson about sales was especially important. I knew that if I wanted to become an entrepreneur in the B quadrant, I had to learn to sell. But I hated knocking on doors. I dreaded it, day in and day out. One day, after hearing 4 replies of, "We're not interested," and 1, "If you do not get out of my office, I'll call the cops," I hit the depths of depression. I went home rather than go back to the office. Sitting in my little apartment in Waikiki, I contemplated quitting. I even considered going back to school and getting my law degree, but I lay down, took a couple of aspirin, and that idea soon passed. It was time to fail faster in a new way. Working for free. Rather than find a job at night, I remembered Rich Dad's advice that it was easier to find work if you were willing to work for free. I found a charity that needed people to dial for dollars at night. Leaving my job at Xerox, I would go uptown and dial for dollars from 7 p.m. to 9:30 p.m. For 2.5 hours, I failed as fast as I could over the phone. Instead of only making 3 to 7 sales calls a day, I was sometimes making over 20 sales calls in 2.5 hours at night. My rejection rate and failure rate went up. But curiously, as my failure rate went up, so did my success in raising money. The more calls I made, the better I became at handling the rejections. I learned what worked with the calls that succeeded and started changing my pitch based on the rejections and the successes. The faster I failed at night for charity, the more I succeeded at Xerox by day. Soon I was climbing up the list of salespeople, rather than being at the bottom of the list. Even though I was not being paid at night, my income by day was going up. Working those extra hours even had an impact on my fun hours. The higher the number of rejections went at the charity, the more fun I had in the nightclubs of Waikiki. Suddenly I was not as afraid to talk to the pretty women in the clubs. I was less awkward, less terrified about being rejected. Soon I was even becoming cool and popular, and women were actually hanging around me. After 4 years at an all-male military school, and then years in the Marine Corps, being around so many pretty women was quite a treat. It was a lot better than being the lonely nerd at the end of the bar staring at the pretty women from a distance. From 10 p.m. to 1 in the morning, I was the disco duck, just like John Travolta in the movie Saturday Night Fever. I even had a white suit, long-collared shirts, disco boots on my feet, and shells around my neck. Everywhere I went, I walked to the sounds of the Bee Gees song, "Staying Alive," playing in my head. My hours were ridiculous and I am sure I looked ridiculous, but it worked. I was failing fast and doing my homework for the communications level of the BI triangle. Failing pays off. In my 3rd and 4th years at Xerox, instead of being at the bottom of the sales pack, I was at the top of the pack. I was also making a lot of money. My failing was paying off. In the 4th year, I was consistently number 1 in sales. Once I made it to the top, I knew it was time to move on. My school days in sales were over. It was time to learn something new. But little did I know that my success in sales was setting me up for the biggest business failure of my life. The 4 business schools. Rich Dad explained to his son and me that there are 4 different types of business schools. They are 1. The traditional business schools. These schools are located at accredited colleges and universities and offer degree programs, such as an MBA program. 2. The family business school. Many family businesses, such as my Rich Dad's business, are great places to get a business education, if you are a member of the family. 3. The corporate business school. Many businesses offer intern programs for promising young students. After graduation, the company hires and then guides their career development. In many cases, the company will pay the tuition and even allow time off for further study. After receiving a formal education, promising employees are often rotated through different divisions of the company, so they get to see the entire business and get hands-on experience. 4. The business school of the streets. This is the school entrepreneurs attend when they leave the security blanket of school, family, or the corporate world. This is the school where your street smarts are developed. Going to school. All four schools have their merits, their strengths and weaknesses. I am not here to say one is better than the other. In my life, I have been fortunate enough to attend all four, in one way or another. A traditional business school. While at Xerox, I did attend a local university night school, with the intent of receiving my MBA. That lasted less than a year. It was not for me. The instructors were either employees of the school or employees of a corporation. The students, for the most part, were seeking to become high-paid, well-educated employees, just like their instructors. They were looking to climb the corporate ladder, whereas I wanted to build and own corporate ladders. It was a different culture and a different curriculum, so I left. A family business school. My friendship with Mike allowed me to attend a family business school via Rich Dad's Businesses. That was a great school for me, simply because it lasted for years and Rich Dad was not only a successful real-world entrepreneur, he was also a great teacher. A corporate business school. Through the Xerox Corporation, I attended one of the best corporate sales training programs in the world. Soon after I was hired, in 1974, the company flew me first class from Honolulu to Leesburg, Virginia, to spend 2 weeks at their sales training facility. It was fantastic. After receiving our classroom training, we immediately hit the streets to practice what we learned in the classroom. Our sales managers were great teachers and mentors. They kept us on track with classroom theory applied to real-world challenges found on the street. We studied hard, not only learning sales skills but also studying our competitors' products and strategies. We had one objective at that time, and that was to beat IBM. They were tough competitors and a worthy opponent, so we knew we had to be up for the challenge. The business school of the streets. But the toughest business school for me was the business school of the streets. Once I left Xerox and hit the streets, I literally hit the streets. The business school of the streets was a horrible school, a harsh teacher, and tough on grades. Many times I came face to face with my greatest fears and the depths of personal self-doubt. Yet, it was also the best business school for me. It was just what I needed. Instead of A's and B's as grades, street grades are measured in dollars earned or dollars lost. Graduation day. In 1978, I graduated from the Xerox Corporate Business School and entered the Business School of the Streets. It was an emotionally tough transition for me. I went from the world of flying first class, having nice offices, a steady paycheck, and everything paid for by the company, to a world where I paid for everything, including paper clips, travel, and other people's salaries and benefits. Before I left the corporate business school, I had no idea how much running a business cost. For 2 years, in order to reduce expenses, my 2 partners and I did not take salaries. Once again, I was working for free, and I knew why Rich Dad insisted his son and I work for him for free. He was preparing us for the world of entrepreneurship, a world where everyone gets paid first and you get paid last, if you get paid at all. Lesson number 4. Success reveals your failures. Another of Rich Dad's lessons was, success reveals your failures. In other words, your strengths will reveal your weaknesses. Again, I did not know what he meant until my own business had become successful. Our Nylon Surfer wallet business was successful in 2 out of the 5 levels. We were successful at the communications level and the product level. The 3 partners had trained for years to be successful at those levels. The problem was we were too well trained at the 2 levels and our success was too great too soon. It was like hooking up a plastic garden hose to a fire hydrant. As soon as international success put pressure on the system, the whole business blew. Our strong points blew out through our weak points. Our strengths had revealed our weaknesses. Our success had revealed our failures. We had failed to strengthen the legal, the systems, and the cash flow levels of the BI triangle. We had them covered, but we failed to strengthen them as our success increased. Back to the drawing boards. After our venture collapsed, 2 of my partners left the business. I wanted to quit also, but Rich Dad said, rebuild the business. It will be the business school you have been waiting for. For the next 6 years, I went back to the drawing board many times. Each failure was less painful and the recovery was quicker. Each time I failed, I knew what to work on. I knew what I had to study next. The business school of the streets was guiding me. Each failure was actually making me smarter and more confident. Each failure made me less afraid of failing and more excited about learning what I needed to learn next. Each failure was a challenge, the door to the next world. If I was successful, the door to the next world opened. If I failed and the challenge beat me, the door slammed in my face. If the door slammed in my face, it meant I needed to get smarter. I needed to think harder. I needed to use my creativity to find a way to get into the next door. In many ways, it was like being a salesman on the street again. Knocking on doors once more. When people ask me how we survived through all those years without money, my answer is, I do not know. I simply took it one day at a time. After my first 2 partners left, and things looked bleakest, 2 new partners showed up, and one of them was my brother John. They brought in some money, but more important, they brought in a new vitality and new skills. One new partner, Dave, brought experience in the systems level of the business. He was excellent at manufacturing. My brother John came in to handle the cash flow level. He was excellent at keeping our creditors happy and suppliers supplying. We also brought in a new advisor, a retired senior auditor from an accounting firm, to help us straighten out our mess. He was happy to work for free since his wife wanted him out of the house anyway. He was happy to have an office to go to. I also believed he found our struggles entertaining. He would chuckle a lot as my 2 new partners and I moaned and groaned about our problems. More than work for free and straighten out our mess, he also helped us raise more capital by teaching us how to raise capital in a more professional manner. As I said, we survived by taking it one day at a time. All I knew was that I did not want to go back to a job as my poor dad had, once his ice cream business failed. In many ways, my philosophy was, I had gone too far to turn back. Rich Dad was correct. It was the best 10-year business school I could have gone to. Starting with Xerox in 1974 and finally having built a successful business by 1984, it was a 10-year process of building, failing, correcting, rebuilding, and failing. For me, it was the best way to learn. Many times, I felt like I was building a race car instead of a business. Our team would work on the business, take it out to the racetrack, step on the gas, blow an engine or hydraulic line, and return to the shop. A system of systems. In many ways, building a business is very much like building a car. A car is a system of systems. A car consists of an electrical system, fuel system, brake system, hydraulic system, and so on. If one of the systems breaks, the car shuts down or becomes unsafe. The human body is also a system of systems. We have the blood system, respiratory system,